Hello and welcome back to the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. After the worldwide success of Machine Head, Deep Purple took their live show to Osaka and Tokyo and delivered a non-calent performance, not ever realising the potential this live album could bring. However, Made in Japan was a huge success, bringing fans and audiences closer to the band and their energetic live shows. With no overdubs, members critical of their own performances, and doubts about the recording quality, Made in Japan surprisingly stands as one of rock's greatest ever live albums. To discuss this with me is my co-host Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, bro?
Been great as usual, and you, man?
Good, yeah, very good. It's a Deep Purple episode, so how can you not be
It
good?
is. Got a Deep Purple shirt.
There you go, I love it. You got a story about that you can tell us in a second, right? So just as normal, guys, welcome to the show. We have a few little terms and conditions. If you're joining us for the first time, we're not serious, you don't actually have to do anything, but I would do us a massive favour. Listen to the show if you like it. If you're on Apple or Spotify, scroll down, give us a review, hit 5 stars, and it means we get seen by more people. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit like and subscribe so you stay up to date with our new episodes and latest content. So without further ado, Made in Japan by Deep Purple, the live album from 1972. As usual, here are some quick album details. So it was released on the 8th of December 1972 and recorded across a 3-night period in Japan in August of 1972. The venues were the Festival Hall in Osaka and the Nippon Budokan in Tokyo. The genre has been classed as hard rock and heavy metal, which we'll discuss later. The length is 1 hour 16 minutes and it was released through Purple, which is Deep Purple's own record label, and produced by Roger Glover and Ian Paice. And the engineer for the gig was Martin Birch, who has done work with bands like Rainbow, Fleetwood Mac, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden. Cool. So before we get into the album, why don't you give us your story about the Deep Purple t-shirt you're wearing? You said there was one there.
Yeah, this is my first rock t-shirt from the first concert I've ever been to. So 1999 in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, I went to a Deep Purple gig. That was my first ever gig in my life. And I've seen Deep Purple another 3 times after that, and including last year, like in November. And yeah, they were phenomenal, of course. There was like, I think the first or second tour with Steve Morse on guitar, I guess, at the time. And yeah, John Lord was still alive, so got to see him live with them. That was, oh man, that man. When I saw him on stage, I like the first image that came to my mind was the cover of Made in Japan. I said, wow, is that guy, right? It's that same guy. He's still around. He's still rocking. And yeah, great. So I still got the shirt. He used to fit a bit better. I don't know. I think it got smaller with time.
How many years ago was that?
We're talking about 1999, so 26 years ago.
Whoa, bro, that's impressive that the shirt still fits. Come on. Yeah, well done. You get an applause for that. Yeah. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I was fat at the time, so it's okay.
Congratulations. Still fits now, yeah, perfect. Excellent. Right. Cool. Right, we're just going to talk a bit about the background of the album. So, like as I said in the opening thing, following the success of Machine Head, which we've done, I think it's episode 16, so we'll link it in the video. Machine Head was a resounding success around the world, but but actually surprisingly, it succeeded in Japan, and they loved it there. So the Japanese branch,
Spinal Tap thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Why have we got to go to Japan? Because of this success, Deep Purple then organised a world tour, touring Machine Head and obviously the other songs as well. And they organised a set of shows in Japan. And this was across 3 nights, the 15th, 16th and 17th of August 1972 in Osaka and Tokyo. And these shows sold out immediately. I mean, that goes to show, you know, how coveted the tickets were.
Well, remember, that was before the internet, right?
Exactly. And that's, bro, I was thinking that earlier. So how people,
like, on the other side of the world, listening to what you do, and it's really impressive.
Well, it's 1972, right? So they'd have queued up at the venue. Am I right?
Yeah.
No phone calls, so you'd sold out immediately. So that's got to be what, thousands of Japanese fans queuing up at these venues to get tickets for Deep Purple. God, that makes you. It's great. So following the sellout of these shows, the Japanese arm of Warner Brothers wanted to record the show. Now, Deep Purple were really, really hesitant about doing this. I don't know why. I haven't looked deeper into the exact reasons each member didn't want to. but they were very hesitant and reluctant to do it. They agreed to it eventually on the condition that they had to okay the equipment being used. They wanted to use their own producer, so they got Martin Birch in for that, and they wanted to have the final say in, even if all the recording and filming got done, and there's nothing wrong with them. Even if Deep Purple listened to that album and were like, no, we don't want to put it out, they weren't going to put it out.
So that was on contract,
I assume
probably
so.
something like that.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Especially
so
if it's
we're
Warner
not going to
Brothers.
release it if we don't like it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing, and this is what for me in my part of this show, the majority of my points are going to be about the band were uninterested in the final result. They didn't care about the show. They were like, okay, well, they thought it was only going to be released in Japan. They didn't want it released to the rest of the world. So they were like, well, screw it. If this is only going out in Japan, yeah, well, we're not going to put a lot of effort in. And so this album really did capture, as we're going to talk about, the spontaneity, the interplay of the band, the random little musical moments we get halfway through a song. And because of that, this is where I think the album succeeded so well. So this is just my opinion.
Well, it does make a lot of sense, man, because I think it's got the energy of a live album, but it doesn't have the tension of a live album. Any musician out there would know that if you're playing live and you're aware that you're being recorded, you normally get a little bit tense, and you maybe don't perform with the same level of improvisation and looseness. You just don't want to do a mistake. And I think they clearly not concerned about doing mistakes. There's more mistakes here and there. I mean, if you can call it mistakes, or
you can call them mistakes, and I will refer to them as mistakes.
Yeah.
But just this is not a negative, and I'll make this clear as the episode goes on.
Yeah, and then they just go with the flow and changing the structures of the songs as they go along. And I think that's just brilliant. The fact that you capture that. And in this age of AI, where a computer can write a song for you, I think live music is something really special, to actually watch a band playing live, not knowing where they're going with the song. Not even the band knows what's going to happen.
Yeah,
so that's
the best part.
It's just amazing. And it's good. It's good because they individually really, really accomplished musicians. They they are masters of their crafts. So there's no way whatever they played live wouldn't sound great. And I would dare to say that they're probably rock's best live band ever. That is my opinion on Deep Purple, because I've seen them live a million times, and they sounded better every time. Even as they got older, they just sounded better. They just got new tricks they could play live. Even with the lineup changes, there's something about Deep Purple and the live audience in front of them that no one else can do like them. There's something beautiful about it, and they are my favorite live band.
There's an energy to them that, as good as Led Zeppelin Song Remains the Same is, as good as all the other live albums of that era, which we'll talk about later, there is an energy there. And this is actually why I think, do you know what, there's no room to talk about what I want to talk about in our section, so I'll talk about it now. The debate, again, and it's not a debate really, but it's just historically, why would some people consider this live album a heavy metal album? And as a heavy metal fanatic, I'm sat there going, well, it's not really heavy metal, but let's analyze why people think it is. The tone of the guitars, the deep, I don't know how to describe it, the thunderous sound of John Lord's keyboards, Ian Gillan's screams, the energy, the pace, Ian Paice's drum fills.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I love Deep Purple. And so when I saw this album and did my research and people calling it heavy metal, I was like, well, really? Or is it just because it's Deep Purple? But after listening to it, I'm not sat here saying it's a heavy metal live album. It's not. But I can completely see the energy, the tone, the screams, the thunderous sounds. It really does. It's the heaviest live album I've heard from the 70s.
Makes sense. And I would say, Space Trucking, the last track, it's I know we're talking about the original release, because there's a double album version of this, which we can talk about as well. But that take of Space Trucking, which is about 19 minutes long, something like that. Yeah, it's insane. And the riff is so heavy. That's where, my opinion, that's where they touch the heavy metal line. It's there. They just crossed the line. on that song. It gets really, really heavy. But what normally, and I say normally because I don't know heavy metal that well, what normally heavy metal bands don't do is to over improvise. They normally stick to the structures, right? They play a song roughly the same length as the studio with the same sections. And this song just goes on and on and on, and they improvise and they go up and down. So I think it has the power of heavy metal in it, but it's got more dynamics, and that's a word I'm going to say a lot today, because the dynamics is what makes this album what it is in many ways.
And as you said, improvisation, which is not a cornerstone in heavy metal at all. Even if we look at two of the big heavy metal bands of the 70s, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, what was the one thing that really split them? As you said, if Black Sabbath wanted to play a show, Tony Iommi would most likely play the same solo, or he would play sections of the solo and then followed by the first 16 bars like the studio, then he might jam for a bit, and then the end.
But normally the band keeps the same structure as the record, so they don't change the song itself. You might improvise a solo but not the song.
Whereas Deep Purple and Zeppelin, we've seen expand songs lives. I think that's obvious. Excellent. Well, I mean, it's a live album, so we don't really have anything to talk about in terms of what was going on at the time, what recording techniques were used. So we want to focus primarily on the performances because it's a live album, and I think it's safe to say each member absolutely shines here. So let's start off with Ian Gillan. From my side, sublime performance. And the thing that sticks out for me is his ability to switch between his low, soft vocals to his high scream. Number one, effortlessly, and number two, so quickly.
Yeah.
When I hear Highway Star and he goes, and it's lovely and smooth, his voice, and it's dragging down big fat tides of everything. And then like the next second, within a second, he's gone up to that high scream, and it's perfect. It's just so good, man.
They still open their shows with that song.
Like that. Yeah. I hope they never stop, because it is just the perfect hard rock song, and I hope it forever is the opening song of a Deep Purple show.
It's just like, I think if talking about Gillan, got to talk about Child in Time, because that song, like, the thing with that is like you would listen to the album, and if you guys are familiar with the song, you know what I'm talking about. That song's about the vocals. It's about the lyrics and the vocals.
Just a second, just to let the listeners and viewers know that we have a dedicated playlist for every episode. In the playlist, you'll see it in the show notes or in the description below. Click the Spotify playlist, and all the songs from the album are going to be in there, as well as any other songs we mention, so that whilst you're watching us and we talk about a specific song, you can go to the Spotify playlist and have a listen, and you see what we're talking about. Please continue, Felipe. Thank you.
So that vocal performance, we know that in studio you can do and redo stuff, and you can try different takes. The thing with studio recordings is, even back in the day when the money was maybe tight for the recording, the tapes were expensive, so you couldn't really just keep redoing stuff over and over. That would cost a lot of money. But if you do a vocal take that you don't like, go and do it again, or even the whole band can go and do it again. Now, I don't know how many takes he had to do to get that perfect studio version of Child in Time done. But when you do it live, you have one take, you have one chance, and especially that was probably not a really long tour, and they only recorded 2 shows. That it
3.
So let's say he had 2 chances of doing a great performance of that song, and I actually think the live one is even better than the studio. As
I agree.
I agree. So you can listen to the studio one, listen to the live one. And as he keeps going higher and higher with the vocals, you're like, no, he's not going to make it to the last one. it's just like, no one can humanly do that. Yeah. It's not possible. And it does it. And if you see videos, I don't know if there's an official video of this show. I never found it. But I had a VHS tape that's old.
Of this one?
Not this one, of them playing Denmark at the same time, same tour.
Okay.
And he did that song like, and it's not struggling to do it. It's like, I can do this. Easy. And he's got total control of his vocal technique. And you got to consider one special thing, which is the monitoring wasn't that good. So the musicians couldn't hear themselves with the same technology we have nowadays with like in-ears and stuff. Yeah. So you have these, what we call them wedges, these amps on stage where the whole sound of the band is coming towards the musician so they can hear what's going on. But you also have the actual sound of the band and the drums behind you. you can see the stages like were not that big, the stages where they were playing. So the drums are really close to the vocals. So it's a mess. There's a really nice part. I want to get the right words here because there's a really funny moment in the album.
I think I was going to reference that.
I don't remember which song was that, but at the end of the song, Gillan says like, can I have everything louder than everything else? He's talking about the monitors. He can't hear anything. It's like, can I just have everything louder? But everything louder than anything else.
I think, ironically, it happens after Child in Time.
Okay.
So he's gone the whole 12 minutes nailing every note and then been at the end like, it's still not good enough for me, the monitoring. Can I have more, please? Even though he's just nailed Child in Time.
I think there's something about him. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's always making jokes, and he's such a great character to watch live. He's the perfect frontman. Yeah.
My next point, feels like one of the band and not the lead singer. No. You never hear or see him trying to show off or take the limelight. When it's his time, when he's doing those screams in Child in Time, fair enough, like take the front of the stage. But I think you see things now where singers feel like they have to occupy the microphone. I feel like, and when I say now, I'm mainly sort of talking, let's say from the 90s to now. I get the impression that some people think playing music, only music to an audience without vocals, unless you go and see a prog band, of course, is going to be boring. So you have singers sat there doing like ooh into the mic or trying to harmonize something a guitar's doing. Gillan knew this time's the band's time. This is Blackmore's time to do his solos. This is John Lord's time. My time's going to come after this 6-minute solo. But he didn't try and impose himself on the performance because he's the lead singer. And for me, that's such a massive deal because, as I just said, you see singers do it so much in the last how many decades. There was a perfect time in the 70s where singers were equally important as the bass player, as the guitarist, as the drummer. And now, in the last 30 years, they're elevated a little bit more. I'm not having a go at singers.
Well, to the point that most people know the names of lead singers. They don't know the names of the rst of the band. That's very common, isn't it?
Exactly. And I just feel like
you name a band, you know who the singer is, you don't know who the bassist or the drummer, and that means in a way that you're listening to the vocals and maybe the lyrics more than the music itself.
Yeah, and I just feel that, like I said, Gillan knows his place.
Blends with the band
blends
so well,
perfectly. Yeah, excellent. Anything else on Gillan?
Well, I could talk about him the whole day. Let's move on. Who else do you want to talk about now?
All of them,
all of them. But no, the next one. Okay. I'm going to talk about the unsung hero of this band. You know who I'm talking about. Roger Glover, right? Oh, yes. Isn't he the unsung hero of Deep Purple? Because everyone, as you said, there's a place for everyone, but everyone's got this like huge stage personality, and you can see them putting all the energy into it, and everyone plays a lot of notes. There's a lot of playing going on, and the bass lines are mostly very simple. And I always use this word in music: never easy. There's no such a thing as easy in music, because that's the famous last words when someone says, "Oh, playing the bass in the song it's easy," and then they mess up. So it's very simple bass lines compared to the overall style of the band. But he is that glue that holds the band together. Because without his solid bass line and really steady rhythm, no one could play around as they do. Right.
My notes here: does the best job a bass player can do, holding the groove, linking with Paice, giving guitars, keys and vocals their space, whilst also flourishing and showing off a tiny bit. And do you know where he does it? His fills.
Yeah.
He'll play, listen to Highway Star, he does his simple, and then going to the next section, you'll hear and as bass players, that is our bread and butter. We know our job. We know that you just want us to sit on the root note, keep the rhythm going, play the harmony that the guitar's playing, link it with the rhythm that the drum's playing, and hold the beat. That's fine. But you got to give us our little 4 beats to get to the next section where we flourish and do something special. No, seriously, man, Roger Glover, an absolute beast of a bass player.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to criticize him now, but it's just to the overall extent of why mistakes are good in this scenario. He does a solo in Space Trucking that is just really bad.
Is it?
It's one note. He holds one note, and it's a high note, and it's just like, I'm like, come on, man. And again, just to reiterate,
It's
Glover
like you can
is
do
the
better than
man.
that.
Yeah, but on
But I
that
think he
night,
never. That's the thing. I saw him doing solos live, and he's great. The thing with that is like maybe he just didn't want it.
yeah, exactly.
So
And on
don't
that
give me a
night,
solo. I just want to groove.
perfectly, yeah. And maybe on that night he didn't fancy it, and that's okay. Maybe the next night he smashed a solo out of the park. I don't care. The point is, this one was bad, and I'm not even criticizing that. I'm saying that they gave us the performance.
I want to
They
bring
gave
Roger
us.
Glover to this show,
I hope
and you guys
do.
are going to spend 15 minutes discussing that one note solo, right?
I see you played some inverted triplets here, Roger. Yeah. My point is, I'm emphasizing that it was a bad solo because they didn't go back and fix it. They
Yeah.
didn't listen back to it and go, "Oh, Roger, do you want to go and why don't you redo that solo tonight in Denmark and we'll put that." No, no. Give us the show how it was. That's all I want from a live album. That's all I want. I want to know what it was like to be there that night. And mistakes like this, or not mistakes, again, maybe some people think it's a great bass solo. For me, a not great solo like this being in there shows the authenticity of it. Shows me that we got what they got that night.
Do you know what that sounds like, Jerry? It's like good live music is like a conversation. You don't necessarily know where you're going with it.
Yeah,
You know the topic, and you take it from there, and you don't have control of what other people are going to say. Even if you
that's a
try
great
really
point.
hard, you can't control them.
Yeah,
So basically, it's like me saying, "Lars, want to talk? Can you talk about this?" And you say, "No, I don't want to talk about this. Move on to another subject." That's pretty much what he did. No, I don't want to do this, right?
Yeah.
I
Amazing.
didn't even perceive that as a solo, because when he said this is a solo, this is that one. I don't
Yeah,
remember
I don't
that.
know what you call it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
So
anyway,
that
I
was it.
mean, it's almost like the less. Just a quick funny story. When we were at uni, remember we had those performance
Yeah,
lessons.
yeah.
The best feedback I ever got about one of my performances was, "Oh, lads, I forgot you were there." And I went, "Oh," I was really disheartened. I was like, "Oh, that's a shame." He said, "No,
That
no,
is
no."
that's a huge
He said,
compliment for
"No."
bassists and drummers.
There you go. As a bass
Yeah.
player, he said you played it so well. You were perfectly in with the drums. Your volume was fine. Your playing was fine. You sank so perfectly into the mix. I found myself hearing the other guitarists and the drummers and the singers more because they were making mistakes. They were doing this. You sat so perfectly there that I didn't notice you were there, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
It,
so
it
in
really,
that vein, the less we say about Roger Glover, the better,
yeah,
because he
exactly.
just
We
did his job.
didn't even notice him,
Yeah,
right? In a
exactly.
good way.
Um,
Maybe, but, it's impressive that they never left him behind on a van or something like that.
yeah.
Like,
So yeah,
he does the job so
he
perfectly
just
every
gets there
night.
every
They
day.
probably
Yeah.
never noticed him in like 50 years or something.
Anyway, should we move on to his partner
Yeah.
in crime, Mr. Ian Paice?
Oh,
You can
yes.
talk majority about this. I just want to say a few things. There's one moment that stood out to me. Okay, and again, I'm gonna make one criticism just to reinforce the same point. In Child in Time, one of the fills he does really doesn't land. And there's
Mhm.
one he does. It's like, oh no,
I know that. I know that
you
one.
know the one,
It's
and
jazz, man. It's jazz.
it doesn't hit quite well. He didn't make a mistake.
He
It's
played over
not
the bar.
wrong.
He played the phrase a bit too early, I guess. I think it
Yeah,
was something
and it
like that.
just rolls over and it doesn't land. Again, I'm just saying this to reiterate that I'm glad we got it and they didn't put an overdub over it. However, I've put this 99% of his fills in this gig are stunning.
Yeah.
And having listened to this gig and paid attention as much as I have this week, I see where you get your chops from.
My,
Because listening to those fills and listening to the intricacy of what he does, and obviously having played with you on tour for 5-6 years, little bars he plays, I'm like, oh, Felipe did that when we covered War Pigs. Or like, oh, Felipe
yeah,
did
it's
that in that song. What a drummer! And this show only exemplifies how perfect he was for this band.
it's difficult to as a musician, sometimes it's difficult to figure out where exactly your roots are, because you listen to a lot of different stuff. But if you think about the very beginnings, what made you play an instrument? The guy that made me a drummer is Ian Paice. The guy that made me go out and buy a pair of sticks and start drumming away. That was Ian Paice, because Made in Japan was the first CD I ever bought in my life.
Oh.
Yeah, I bought 2 CDs on that. They had some money, so I went to the record shop, really old school stuff, and I got sorry, excuse me. I got 2 CDs. Was Dire Straits on Every Street, which was a kind of a 90s, like a bit of a country album they did, the last studio album, and I got Made in Japan, 2 completely different CDs. Yeah. When I got home and listened to Made in Japan and listened to the drumming on it, I was like, I want to be a drummer. At that time, my mum wanted to put me in the keyboard lessons. Oh, you're going to learn keyboards, you're going to play Jingle Bells and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to be a drummer. I was just like, that's too big and noisy and expensive. I want to be a drummer, Mum. I want to be a drummer. So
I just want to imagine little 10-year-old Felipe with a beard already, just being like, Mum, I want to drum. Felipe, I've told you, you're going to learn Beethoven. No, Mum, I want to drum.
So I really wanted to be a drummer because of that, and because of the mule. That solo is great. That solo, you see how musical he is as a drummer. He would pick one phrase, one musical idea, and play that in different levels, different speeds, different accents, like moving around and going back. So it's like having a conversation with himself. He goes back to the theme, goes into it. So he plays a fairly long drum solo that is not boring by any means.
Yep.
But even with that amazing drum solo in it, the drum solo is not the best part of the drumming overall in the album, right?
Agreed.
Everything he does is just so musical. There's something about him. He is the perfect blend of jazz and funk, but louder. So he's got, yeah.
How so? Could you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, when you listen to Strange Kind of Woman, that's much more funky than the other drummers at the time. And if you listen to Machine Head, the album,
yeah.
Never Before. Yeah, Never Before. That song's really funky.
They'll be in the playlist. There's another one that's really funky.
Well. I'm trying to remember the other one.
Maybe I'm a Leo.
Maybe I'm a Leo. That is so funky, that whole song. So he had that sort of a funk influence. I don't know where he got it from. And jazz, of course, but I think he was a big fan of big band jazz. So he took all the tradition of jazz into rock music in many ways. The jazz drummers, they would be looking for the hits, for the stabs, as we call it in music. When the whole band hits a certain note at the same time, he would go for those and double those phrases on the drums. That's like big band jazz. Mm-hmm. Like that is that sort of music, and he brings a lot of that into rock. So he's got some finesse, which is not that common in heavy rock drummers. Most of the heavy rock drummers, they heavy hitters all the time. Everything they do is loud. Ian Paice has got dynamics. He's got, like, he plays a lot of ghost notes, which means you playing at a certain level, but there's some notes he plays on his snare drum that are much quieter than everything else. Those are the ghost notes or the quiet notes he plays. And so he's got dynamics inside the groove, and he really drives the band in terms of dynamics. What is dynamics in music? When you play loud and quiet, is that contrast of levels, and he is a master of that. So there's funk, there's jazz, there's blues. He swings all the time. That's another characteristic of his drumming. Even when the band is playing kind of a straight rhythm, he's swinging on top of it. He's imposing that swing.
Yeah.
So he's always a little bit jazzy, in my opinion, and a bit funky and bluesy as well. So he's got, like, everything that came before rock drumming is part of his drumming, and he sums it up really well. It's just the way he does it. It's just amazing. I think everyone goes on about John Bonham as the probably the most influential drummer of all times, I would say, because he influenced everyone who came after him, and rock music became bigger than everything that existed before rock music. But I would say Ian Paice is as good as John Bonham, at least. So I think it's and his importance to rock drumming is, in my opinion, at the same level.
The more I listen to Deep Purple, the more I'm inclined to agree with you. And this is not taking anything away from Bonham, but Paice, my God, man, the fills in this album, unreal. So I don't know how he got so many sort of snare hits. It's one of the Child in Time ones, where the whole fill lasts like a bar, and it even just for a fill, it takes you on this journey where it starts off a little slow. I'm just going to make it up. It's something like, it's a scream. It's like, ah, ah, and you're just like, hold on, you start here, you're like, okay, I get where this is at, and then it takes you to another level, and then there's like 8 snares, and you come back down, and you're like, fucking hell, that was just to take me to the next phrase. Like, it wasn't even like a drum fill to start the song. It's just to take me to the next section. And the album is filled with moments of drum fills where I'm sat there going, wow.
Yeah.
The only other point I had to make about Ian Paice was, and this is what to me signals the sign of his talent. It's in Space Trucking, and there's a section in the middle where it goes on for 4 or 5 minutes, and he just keeps the snare going. I can't even remember the rhythm. It's something like something like that, and it's perfect. He doesn't ever waver off of that rhythm. There might be a cymbal hit here, a cymbal hit there, but he's just the snare, and that's the moment where I said, "Dude, you've blown my brains with these fills. You can play really loud and really heavy when it's needed. Highway Star, perfect example. You've done all the things that Felipe said, combined jazz elements, this, that, the other. But what's most sort of impressive is that you've done your job. You've held the beat and the rhythm for 4 minutes, an extended period where you haven't changed what you're playing. There isn't even
it never
break.
sounds over the top, in my opinion.
No. But my point about that section is that he was just a true professional.
Yeah,
he just did it. But then when just like we said about Gillan, he shines when he needs to shine. When he's got those moments to put those fills in, trust me, he'll do them. But when he doesn't need to, and when the other band are doing the thing, just like Roger Glover as well, he gives them the space they need, because he's not the lead guy. We know this.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Man, what a drummer. Anything else?
He's the boss, right? He's the only member of the original lineup who's still in the band. He's the boss now.
Okay. Anything else about Paice?
Well, again, I could do a whole
I know you
episode
could,
on it. We're not going to do
let's
move
on. So let's move on to Jon Lord. Every time we talk about Jon Lord, there's always this debate going on about who's the best keyboard player in rock, and I don't want to have that debate now because we don't need to. We can just appreciate everyone. There doesn't really need to be a winner. Rick Wakeman always comes into the conversation.
Yeah.
Is it what's the Emerson? Keith Emerson?
Yeah, Keith Emerson.
Keith Emerson.
Yeah, Keith Emerson. Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
I just feel that Jon Lord has such a vibe to him.
Yeah.
There is an element of groove that I'm not saying Rick or Keith don't. Again, we're not trying to compare here. I'm just saying that when I listen to this album, some of my vibe and groove will come only from what Jon Lord is doing. For example, in the first solo of Child in Time, when it sort of picks up the pace, he's doing the job of a rhythm guitarist on the keys.
Yeah.
And you hear it, the beats are dun, and you hear his keys go dun, 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 dun. But then after a few bars of that, he goes dun, 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 dun. And he messes around with it, and it's just ever so slightly changing the rhythms. That Glover and Paice are doing their thing. Glover's probably sticking on the same note, Paice is on the same beat. Blackmore's soloing everywhere. Gillan's obviously not doing anything. How do you keep the music interesting when you play an extended 3 or 4 minute jam? Tiny little rhythm changes that Jon Lord does throughout the album, but I just think it's most obviously shown in Child in Time.
Playing the spaces, isn't it?
Playing the spaces, figuring out what's not there that I can do without taking the attention away from Ritchie.
Yeah.
How am I going to keep it interesting? Well, I'll do that for 4 bars, and I'll switch up the rhythm a tiny bit. I'll just change one element. Instead of coming in on the beat, da-dun, I'll do off the beat. Da-dun, like that. Just sit there.
Yeah, there's something about keyboards, like when
unbelievable.
When you're the soloist in a band, like, so there's 2 main soloists, so Ritchie Blackmore and him, but Blackmore's got the advantage of the guitar. It's a loud instrument. It's naturally the solo instrument in a rock band. And So it's a tough competition, isn't it? Lots of rock bands don't even have a keyboard player. To be a keyboard player in a band and to be able to rock as hard as the guitar player, that is, I think that's I don't know any other keyboard player who could do it as well as John Lord.
Yeah.
And he had great knowledge of the instrument, of the technology of the instrument, so he could make it noisy enough when he wanted to. It's a lot of distorted stuff going on. Also, he's got the classical music background mixed with blues, so that's an interesting thing. When you listen to it, it's like, if you into classical music, you know that's really strict. You play things note by note.
You said two things that I want to. Can I just go back to one?
Yeah.
Just where you said about the tone. Several moments in the solos, especially Highway Star, I don't think you know whether it's him or Ritchie Blackmore that starts the solo. Because there's that opening note. There's that opening note where it's like, and you're like, hold on, is this Lord on the keys, or is it Blackmore holding like an open note? And you just don't know because his tone is so good. It's almost like he wants to sound like an electric guitar.
It's like a second guitar in the band, but not really, because you got different, different textures you can do with keyboards that the guitar player couldn't do.
Just like Child in Time, we get the organ.
I would say Child in Time, there's a brilliant moment, which is after, I think, the first round of the lyrics, when the vocals get really high and the song gets more and more intense and builds up, and it leads to the solo. And I was expecting the guitar solo, right? Because it's just so intense, it's so loud. You got Ian Gillan shouting, and then out of the blue you have this keyboard coming in. It's like, wow. And he managed to make it work, because the keyboard would never be as intense as those vocals or guitar or drum fill. It's just not as powerful and loud. But he's so expressive. His musical ideas are so great, they just works perfectly.
He just knows perfectly how to find the right tone for the right song. Even the I've got here, sounds and effects choice is so good. The thickness of texture in that initial lazy riff, the song Lazy, there's a moment where I think he's playing the riff in both hands, and whatever tone he's chosen is sublime, because that is the most metal moment of the album. In a jazz song called Lazy, it's that do 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 do. He's done something where he's doubled his hands, got a crazy effect going on, and doubled with Ritchie Blackmore's guitar, it sounds so thick and heavy that, as I've just said, for a jazz song, it's actually the most metal moment of the album, in my opinion. Just sublime, just sublime. I wanted to, sorry, I did interrupt you because I just wanted to go back to his tone, but you were mentioning about classical music.
Yeah, so classical music is normally too strict, isn't it? That's my point. It's normally really strict. So you have, if someone's got a classical music background and you want to write music, you normally go for a composition where everything is in its place, and you play things note by note. And that's not how he approaches music, and not, at least not when he's improvising. So I can hear a lot of blues in his phrasing when he's improvising. So there's a lot. So when you think of,
he's classically trained, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. Someone will be like, oh, he wasn't classically trained.
No, he was. He was really into classical music. Yeah.
Well, and let me just tell you this. So I don't want to sound like a snob, because I do listen to a lot of classical music. In Space Truckin', in his section, there is a suite of music called Gustav Holst's The Planets, and this is a composer called Gustav Holst who wrote a suite of music for each planet, and he's attributed a personality to each planet, and it's stunning. If you like classical music,
I think that was a huge influence on John Williams, who wrote the Star Wars soundtrack.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, in Space Truckin', take the word space. John Lord plays a little melody from one of Holst's Planets suites. I think it's Jupiter. It's either Jupiter or Mars. It's the one that goes. I think it's Mars or Jupiter. He does it. He just takes one little moment. But I just thought it's so clever, man, because
that's really clever.
John Lord is he's playing in a blues rock band, so fine. He's gonna have to improvise. He's gonna have to play bluesy notes, but he's put in his own little homage to classical music. Not only has he done that, he's done it so appropriately. Taken a melody from the Planets suites and put it into Space Truckin'. It's just like so clever, just brilliant. So yeah, what a man, what a keyboard player.
Yeah, and then again, huge personality in a way. It's like you can see that is just like Ian Gillan, he was always having fun on stage. So what a musician.
Yeah.
And now we got to talk about.
Yeah, just for listeners, I've put in the Mars and the Jupiter suites into the playlist. I think it's Jupiter, but enjoy them both. Have a listen. They're both fantastic pieces of music. Yeah. Yes, go on, sir.
So next we're going to talk about now Ritchie Blackmore, isn't it?
The man, yeah.
Complicated character, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of find it's just easier if we don't talk about him and we just talk about his.
No, you've got to talk. We're not talking about anyone's personality.
Well, he's not a massive dickhead, is he? He's just a little controlling in places or whatever. But anyway.
No, the thing with him was he ultimately got kicked out of the band for his overall attitude, I guess. But that's what matters about him in this album specifically is how. I think, in my opinion, is the one album where he really stretched his abilities. Excuse me. He took his guitar playing to like the highest level of improvisation that you can get without completely destroying a song. Let's put it like that, because it sometimes it goes so far. I'm like, where are you going now, mate? They're still playing a song, but it just works. Right, I'll give one fine example of that. The intro of Smoke on the Water. So the most, probably, I don't know, it has to be on the top 3 of like most iconic riffs of all time, right? Yeah. If it's not, I'm putting it there. I don't care. So he plays the riff once and then he goes and changes it. Like, come on, you just released the song, it's a massive hit. And he changed the riff immediately, like on the second time around. He plays around with the rhythm, playing the same note, but he changed the order of the notes and the way he phrases it, and it becomes another riff. And then he goes back to it, and the song actually starts. So he is so free on stage. Like, he's like, not even the most strict thing you can have in a song, which is the opening riff, is the one thing you shouldn't change. He goes on and changes it, and it sounds good. That is difficult.
He does it in Lazy as well.
Yeah,
he does that initial do 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 do, and he's like, hold on, no, that's not what's supposed to happen. But I've got that here on my notes, and I've written this. So I kind of might have a bit different look at this on the new. He's teasing us with his playing. Yeah. I think he knows that we want the riff just to be simple, sharp. But for Ritchie Blackmore was famous, as we spoke about in the Rainbow episode, again, episode 76, Rainbow Rising. We spoke about his love for classical music, and I think, as you can see from the Ritchie Blackmore timeline, the classical music starts creeping in more as the 70s go on. Mm-hmm. Here, as you said, classical music is very organised. You play things how you're meant to play it, and I think in an album like Machine Head, where the blues is a very prevalent part of it. I think he's saying, hold on, no, we're not going to play this like how it should be, because we're a blues band, we're a blues rock band. So I'm gonna mess around a bit with a few things. It's just teasing and flirting with the audience, really. But I think what it does is, especially in Lazy, when the moment hits and the rest of the band come in, it's almost a little sweeter.
Yeah.
I think we've heard the studio version and we know, okay, he's done the first lick, waiting for the second lick, and then the band come in. It's almost like the first lick happens. Hold on, he's thrown us off because we didn't get the second lick. What's going on? This isn't right. What's happening? Bang! The whole band come in and it's back to normal, and you're like, oh yeah, that's hit quite nicely. Yeah. The only other thing I have to say about Blackmore, well, again, this goes to the nonchalance of the album, like I was saying. Yeah. That little polka jam in Lazy before the finale. Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit of humor in it.
It's weird, it is, but it's just, again, a little bit of humor. It just exemplifies the easygoing attitude of this album and the nonchalance about it. They didn't care that this was going to go out. Well, yeah, they literally didn't care. They thought it was only going to go out in Japan.
Maybe that's one of the main reasons why the album's so good. If you're not 100% aware that this is going to become a recording that is going to, still be listened to people like 40 years after the release, if you're not aware of that, there's no pressure. It's all about performing. And again, as I said at the beginning, the whole performance for me is like a conversation. They're just having fun. They're playing their little bits here and there. There's loads of like guitar and keyboard battles, and there's an amazing one with vocals and guitar on Strange Kind of Woman. That's when Ritchie Blackmore is just playing his guitar licks, and Ian Gillan proceeds to repeat the same phrase.
Yep.
And it's clearly not a phrase they rehearsed, like note by note. Again, it's improvised. They're doing it on the spot. And yeah, and I think Ritchie Blackmore, in a certain way, for the improvisation side of it, he was kind of the leader in that sense.
Yeah,
He's the guy who's really pushing the boundaries. And I think modern guitar playing wouldn't be half as good as it is if he didn't exist, because he influenced every heavy metal guitar player from the 80s and everything
100%.
They came after Deep Purple. So he's
100%.
one of those, you know.
I think for me to finish off on Ritchie Blackmore, his guitar tones. I think it's easy for a live, especially in the 70s, it's easy for a guitarist to sort of just stick on the same tone for the guitar, especially when the energy of the songs, song after song, stays the same. But we've got that really hard-hitting distorted solo and the sound in general in Highway Star, followed by the really soft, sweet, smooth solo, which is the first Strange Kind of Woman solo. It just has a different vibe to it. And it's weird because it almost sounds like a different guitarist. And I think that's a compliment to Blackmore. It's that he can sound like two different players. And then again, more little innovations. He's got that little violin effect towards the end of Space Trucking, about 15 minutes in.
He's playing around with the volume knob.
Yes, I did Google to see if he was using a bow like Jimmy Page did, but he's playing around. Basically, for anyone who's not guitar savvy, there's a volume knob on the guitar, and you can sort of pick a note and then pull the volume knob. I mean, I can sort of demonstrate it for anyone watching. So if you've got the volume knob here, you can pick a note, and then as soon as you play the note, you turn the knob down, turn the knob back up, and slide it up and down like that. And that way you're going to get this little effect that like it's swelling, like a wow, like that. Yeah. And that's really cool as well.
Almost makes the guitar sound like a violin, isn't it?
And again,
a cool effect.
Look at what we've spoken about in the last minute. The similarities with Led Zeppelin's live performance, the massive drum solos, the call and response between the guitarist and the guitarist and the singer, and making your guitar try and sound not like a guitar. So I think that'd be another good conversation to have. You know, not necessarily who did it first, but where did these come from, and you know why. Yeah. You know. Anyway, anything else about Ritchie Blackmore?
I think, I think I've covered everything I wanted. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to point out a mistake for the sake, again, of just proving that mistakes belong in live albums. The Highway Star guitar solo, I love it. I love it because you can tell he's focused on delivering the energy of the solo more than the correct note. Because it's the part that goes... When he does it the second time, he completely fluffs it up. He goes... And it just tells me that he's not sat there looking at his guitar trying to make... He's probably focused on the audience, or like put his, got his foot up on the monitor. And I love it, man. I love it. And that solo, by the way, the Highway Star guitar solo... I think it deserves its own episode, and we might do that when we do another solos episode. It's just stunning. And the fact that there's two solos in the song. The guitar one has its own first half that's kind of does its own thing. The keyboard one has its own first half, but they both end the same way.
Yeah.
The guitar one does it, and then John Lord does it in the second solo.
Yeah, it's an amazing ending. Because I think it's a solo that tells a story. Normally, when you normally really good guitar solo has a great start and a great ending, and that's enough.
Yeah,
honestly, that's enough. But he tells the story on every single bar, every single note of the solo. He builds up to that ending, and it's one of those scenarios where every note matters in the solo. Everything he's doing, it's actually. They can keep those guys, not only Ritchie Blackmore, those guys, they can keep your attention with a long solo, a long song. You're still like, you don't disconnect. You don't even notice that the song is lasting for 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's brilliant. I'll say one more thing about the five of them. You know, when people come with, if you could create your own like dream band, like the dream lineup, pick 5 musicians, keyboard, drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. and name, you know, your favorite rock musicians to come up with that dream band. I would do a 7-piece band.
Okay.
And it would be this Deep Purple, that lineup, because you can't change it. It's just
Okay.
they work so well together. And you on tambourine and me on cowbell, so we can jam it. That's
Yeah, I think I'd like that as well. So yeah, that would be fine. Honestly though, like it is. This is like there's no weak link in the band. Everyone does their job perfectly.
Yeah,
stunning.
Yeah.
Just a quick note on the production. Again, I think we've covered most of it in the sense of what I wanted to make note of. No overdubs, mistakes throughout the album. They left in the unnecessary interactions between the band members, and it's great. Why not? Why not? Like I said, I want to listen to that show and imagine like I was there. And the other thing I just wanted to make at the end of Child in Time, the little way doesn't he talk to one of the audience members about their height? He's like, "Yeah, you're 4'6". Don't worry, there's taller people out there." And then the music goes on. He's like, "Oh, there's going to be someone who's 1,000,000 stone heavier than you." And it's just random. I don't know what he's talking about.
I think he's away from the microphone as well because it's really quiet.
It's, really faint,
it's like he's just having a chat with someone in the audience.
And it's
so much fun.
easy at that moment to look at they recorded it on an 8-track, and it's so easy at that moment to just say, "Oh, we don't need that. Turn the vocal track down for that part." But they didn't.
Yeah,
just a quick shout out to the Japanese audience because I know it is within there are so many quiet moments in this album because of the dynamics, as you mentioned, like Child in Time, and I can just imagine if that was in England or the USA, people probably shouting over it, whistling, shouting things. There is a general respect in the Japanese culture and tradition, and I know this even from looking at videos of excuse me, of jazz musicians playing. The audience will sit there and take in the song, and they won't sort of shout. You know, I love it when people shout, "Oh, I love you, Ian," but there's just something that you get the impression from the lack of noise during the quiet section. Some people will be like, "Well, where the hell are the crowd? Why are the crowd not up?"
You can hear the applause when they finish the song.
And
you can hear they're there and they're really energetic. But
exactly, I look at it as they were being respectful. They were sat there taking in each 12-minute performance and clapping at the end madly. Towards the end of the album, you can see you can hear Blackmore do little sections like rhythmically, and then you hear them start to clap because they're like, "Oh, do we clap now?" And they're like just clapping in time. But yeah, shout out to them.
It's perfect interaction. Like they interact when there's space for it, and they listen. And it's like maybe there's a reason why they decided to do this. They decided to do this tour not only because the albums were selling well, because they knew it was a good environment to record something. Maybe the label or whoever came up with the idea, because you have the audience participating without getting in the way of the performance, and that's really important.
Great point.
Yeah,
cool. Well, let's finish off with just a little discussion about well, I suppose live albums of the 70s. You wanted to talk about live album relevance.
Yeah, I think I long ago I read an article by one of those rock journalists, I don't know which one, but basically going on about, you know, live albums are not really relevant. Why would someone just release a live version of a song that we already know? And it's like, yeah, it is not relevant if you play note by note as in the studio, if there's no changes, or if you don't play it as well as the original one. Right? If you can't execute that music live and make it better, there's no point. It's got to be better. Right? Why would you re-release something saying, right, this is the product, like next month we're going to do it again, but it's just shit, but we're going to release it, right? It's not as good, you know. It's like you drink your Coca-Cola, cool, we're going to come up with which actually they did a new formula for Coca-Cola, and it's really shit, but you know, it's still you should buy it, and then you go back to the original one, right? So with a live album's tricky to do, because like you've mentioned Led Zeppelin, so just to compare, like two of my other favorite bands, maybe my top 3 bands would be in no particular order, Deep Purple, Zeppelin, and Pink Floyd. But when you listen, like Pink Floyd only came up with a proper live album in the 80s. And it's like there's a 10-piece band, loads of like session musicians on stage with them, and they touched it up in studio. They, you know, improved some of the stuff, overdubbed stuff, although they probably would deny this, but it's the truth. And Led Zeppelin has the now they came up with better stuff like recently, but recently like 15 years ago. So,
Yeah.
but in the 70s, the only live recording they released was The Song Remains the Same, which for me does not reflect how good they were, not even as a live band, and they were not happy about it. They were never happy about the album. So
I think we've agreed between us How the West Was Won is a
that
much better
is
live
that
album.
is yeah. So Deep Purple has this like amazing moment in time where they, without any expectation from anyone, without any anticipation, without any ridiculous preparation or marketing or anything, to just say, let's record a live album. And it's interesting to notice that like the songs in the album are basically Machine Head. So that's them playing stuff they just wrote and released, and they're really into that. They're really passionate about that music. So there's 7 songs in the album, right? And if I'm not wrong, Machine Head's also got 7 songs. And out of those 7 songs, 4 are the same. So basically, over half of what they do there is Machine Head, is the whole album. So they got Chowding Time from In Rock, which is a great album. They've got The Mule from Fireball, yes, and Strange Kind of Woman is a single they released in between a couple of albums. So the rest of it is Machine Head. So imagine this: like we got this album, so we're basically just releasing it again, but live. And it is better. And the album is already like a huge success. Probably the best-selling album, probably one of rock's most iconic albums. And then you go and do it live again. So it just has to be better. There's no excuse why you'd just re-release an album, which people do nowadays to get your money again. But like, you've bought this. Now, this is a remix version, which is pretty much the same. Buy it again. But they're not doing that. They're just doing something. They're taking those songs to a complete different level. And you see, I think the fact that they pretty much played Machine Head live in almost its entirety is, it shows that they were really committed to the new music they were making. And the live performance is really passionate, is really energetic. I love it. Yeah, great.
I completely agree with you. And what this album did actually is it elevated the live album as a format, because sort of in that time, live albums, I think that they'd be considered inferior or second to studio albums. They might have been like a contractual obligation or like a bootleg something or other. But the fact that they decided to release this live album with such high quality performances, with such high quality sound, it really kind of made the live album a respectable format. And bands sort of took on after that. Wow, we can do this to this level. As well as this, the other impact that this album had, I was reading, just highlighting the global reach of rock music in the 70s. Because nowadays, we got Black Label Society released Ozzy Osbourne released an album in Japan. So many live albums come from Japan, but in 1972, don't forget, rock and heavy metal had not been around for that long at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
And to show that a sold-out arena in Osaka and Tokyo were welcoming this kind of music, just showed the growing importance of international markets and rock music.
And rock music became like universal. Really. It's not only UK and America anymore. That belongs to the world now. That's
massive album. Excellent, cool. Should we finish off?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. For new listeners and viewers, for every album we choose, Felipe normally chooses one album, I choose the next one, and we'll do a little monologue at the end. Whoever chose the album does a little monologue at the end, just expressing their thoughts on the album. So this is mine, obviously. Every member of Deep Purple delivered something extraordinary and made in Japan, yet uniquely human. Ian Gillan's voice is incredible, effortlessly moving between tender lows and soaring highs, being the star when it's his time, but never hogging the spotlight, instead blending in seamlessly with the band and choosing his moments. Roger Glover holds the groove like a true pro, linking perfectly with Paice while giving the guitars, keys and vocals space to shine. Ian Paice is pure precision and energy. The rolling snare I mentioned in Space Trucking is the definition of professionalism, doing so little, so perfectly, for so long. Nearly every fill is immaculate, Meanwhile, John Lord blurs the lines between rhythm and lead, often intertwining with Blackmore's guitar so seamlessly that you can't tell them apart. His thick, textured sounds in Lazy and playfulness in all the solo and jam sections are just brilliant. Then there's Ritchie Blackmore, teasing the audience with fragments of riffs before delivering the big moments. His tone is stunning, shifting from the raw power of Highway Star to the smooth beauty of Strange Kind of Woman. Even his cheeky little polka jam in Lazy captures the band's easygoing confidence and nonchalant attitude. The production makes this album truly timeless. No overdubs, no polishing, just raw, unfiltered performances. You hear the mistakes, like a missed drum fill in Child in Time, or the banter with the audience left in the mix. These imperfections don't detract, they enhance the experience, making you feel like you're there in the room. Now, don't mistake my insistence of nonchalance and mistakes for laziness or carelessness. They care, and they show it. But I sit wondering, if they had focused on making the show as good as it can be, or if they spent hours and hours rehearsing to record one perfect live album, would it have been as good? I think not. In a world full of perfect music, where each drum beat and bass note is insisted upon to be precise and correct, let's remember and celebrate the moments captured in music history where the imperfections actually enhance the experience and bring us closer to what it would have been like to see these rock legends in their absolute prime.
Amazing.
What an album. Probably one of the first live albums I ever heard. My dad had it on CD, and I remember even then just hearing Highway Star. I must have been 10 years old, maybe a bit younger, hearing Highway Star, not knowing anything about the instruments, not knowing who anyone was, just hearing the energy and being like, that's... And when I liked it, my dad then took me on to Machine Head, and Machine Head was probably arguably one of the first rock albums I ever listened to, and still one of my favourites. So
it's great, but it's just there's a different energy to Made in Japan, isn't it? Those songs, they became something else live, and if you watch Deep Purple live, it's a different experience every time.
Yeah.
And it's just, they leave you with that feeling, which is like, what just happened here? It's really weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's so unpredictable, and it's so much fun. And it's, I just have a feeling that they are always having a good time when they perform live. And yeah, it's a band that I had the pleasure to see live many times. And this album is just a masterpiece. Everyone should listen to it. Should be a school subject. Everyone should have this in school. Just say.
And on that note, we say thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or Amazon, please scroll down, give us a review. It takes 20 seconds of your time, but does the world of good for us and shoots us up the charts to be seen by more people. If you're watching us on YouTube, share this video with your friends or other people who like Deep Purple. Like and subscribe to stay up to date with more content. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for being with us once again. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.